Hi everyone, welcome to the Property Finance Podcast, and today I'm joined by Scott Williams. We've taken a slightly more laid-back tone to this one. So, Scott, for those that don't know you, those who haven't seen the show, who haven't seen the increased social media presence, who haven't seen your face just plastered everywhere, give us a bit of a background, who you are, what you do.
That's obviously your algorithms.
That's it, yeah. My algorithm is now fixed on you now.
So obviously I'm Scott, as you say, and I'm the founder of Property Developer Show. Formerly a property developer myself, sort of got involved in commercial finance, mortgages, exited that business at the end of 23, start of 23. Get my dates confused these days. Everything just merged into one once COVID happened, and it's still 2021 for me. So yeah, set the show up last year and did 3 events: Stoke, Birmingham, Manchester, and then yesterday, day before, Wednesday or Friday today, we ran our first event in 2025 in Milton Keynes, and the business is sort of momentuming really nicely, and really excited for this year. 4 more locations to go, which obviously you're playing a big role in supporting the business.
That's it, yeah.
I appreciate that.
So just talk us through that. So it's a big change to go from being a property developer, renovating, developing, etc., to then wanting to run essentially an events company is what you are now. But I think it's what I kind of want to get across to people who listen to this is it's not just the shows. You are still dabbling in property. You're not one of these who, and for risk of sounding like a bit of an arse, you're not one of these people who are now making more money out of being a property educator, trainer, or events runner. Like, this is becoming a fully fledged business on its own, with its own right, but you're also still in the property side. And kind of what's the sort of thing you're working on at the minute? And then we'll get into the show and aspirations and stuff like that.
Property-wise, you mean?
Yeah. So what at the minute, property-wise, so obviously I think you had, at the point of recording this, one that you just sold, I think.
So I had sold it and that fell through, but I've just had another offer literally today for asking price. So hopefully get that signed up and sold. But that's just a 2-bed bungalow, really simple flip.
Talk us through that one, just so we got, because I remember you running this one past me when you first got it, and it's a bloody good deal from memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really straightforward deal, not a lot to it. New sort of electrics, bathroom, kitchen, moving the sort of space around, cosmetic stuff, obviously carpets, flooring, all the usual stuff that go into making a property nice. I mean, it's a mega house. I'd live in there myself, even though investing, you shouldn't look at things like that. But it's just turned out really, really nice. And bought it at a good price and selling it obviously at profit. So that, but on the flip side of that, just done a deal which was like an overage where we secured it with the vendor for 90,000, sold it on to an investor at 100,000, obviously kept the difference on the overage. So doing stuff like that because I've been in the industry, a while now, and been in and around the local space, that opportunities arise that I kind of, as long as I've got the cash or I can create something from the opportunity, I tend to do that. So, but also finally got planning permission on a plot of land that's been in planning for 2 years, about 2 weeks ago now, I think, 3 weeks ago. So looking to offload that.
I'm right in thinking that's the one where you've got a bridging loan on it.
That's right. Well, not anymore. We've just refinanced.
That's it. And you had some problems with the bridging loan, I think, at one point?
Not so much problems. The problem kind of lay with the fact that the sale, we'd sold it. I mean, it's one of those deals that kind of, A, highlights the importance of having margin.
Yeah.
And B, highlights the genuine risk of property in general.
No matter what the deal, there's always a risk that something could go a bit funny.
Yeah. Because if this deal had played out in the way that obviously we'd set out at the beginning, it would have been a great deal, great profit margin, 30% on the basis that we managed to sell it in the time frame that we were trying to sell it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not at 30% now. We're more like 5%. But
it's still profitable.
Yeah, we're in worst case scenario, and it's not bankruptcy or liquidation. It's just very much like, okay, we'll make a little bit more than just washing a face, but at least we got the money back. But basically, we bought a 3-bed semi, plot of land out the back. Already had planning for 2 3-bed semi-detached that had lapsed. We basically resubmitted with those two, exactly the same, but the old original owner wanted to retain the garage to the right.
Right.
And we essentially knocking those garages down and getting a detached 3-bed bungalow on there as well. So we were kind of maximising, obviously, the site from that perspective. And then we'd sold the existing house to someone that was really eager to move in, and we'd bought the whole plot at 280,000. We'd sold the house at 280,000.
Brilliant.
And
that's always a good start.
Yeah. And they just basically messed us around for 6 months. I don't think they were ever in a position to buy it from a mortgageability perspective. They had one mortgage offer pulled, and then another valuation went in. So we just messed about. And because we were kind of taking to the 11th hour, we didn't have enough time to refinance off the bridging loan. So we were hit with a renewal fee of 5%. So that, we probably, over the last 2 years, about 55,000 has gone on interest and renewal fees. Which
is mad, really, when you think about it. And it kind of raises a good point, which is when you're coming into these deals, a lot of people obviously have come, and we'll touch on property education a bit because I think it's an important topic to touch on, but a lot of people have come into deals having been on a 3-day course, or they've been on a mentorship with someone who just doesn't know how to educate them, doesn't understand how to analyse deals and things like that. Obviously, given your experience, obviously you've run a successful mortgage brokerage, you've obviously got the events company, the property company, everything else, your knowledge is pretty up there. What are you looking at when you're analysing these deals? What are kind of the key bits that you're looking at before you get in there? Because of all the deals you've done, I mean, it's fair to say not one has gone bad yet. Some have been a bit close to the wire, obviously, because of things out of your control. But realistically, what are you looking at and analysing before you say, yes, let's do it?
So, although I've taken risk in my life, I'm quite risk adverse.
Yeah.
Even though that's a bit of an oxymoron, being a property investor, because you've got to take risks to obviously make money. But
you can minimise that risk, though, can't you?
Of course, yeah. And that's what I'm always looking for with deals. I won't overextend myself to the point where I think if this goes wrong, I won't be able to get myself out of this trouble in some capacity. Also looking at what exits are available, how can we change this deal to make it as we've had to do. So we've rented out the main house, and that's now on a buy-to-let mortgage that's been refinanced at 300,000. So we know the asset value's there. So that's kind of,
it's pivoting with stuff as other stuff comes up.
Exactly that, yeah. And it's being able to, the trick with that is understanding that from the off, and then being able to manage that process and not just bury your head in the sand and just hope that all the troubles go away and you manage to sell it, because that would be the worst possible. And a lot of people surprisingly do that. They just think, oh, this will sort itself out eventually. Yeah. Whereas my approach from the off was, right, okay, well, what if X, Y, and Z doesn't go to plan? Where are the exits as such? And I think you've got to go into these with any deal with an open mind to things going wrong, because they can go wrong. Obviously, that's not the case that you want to be looking at in terms of, well, this is definitely going to go wrong, of course. You want to be thinking positively about the deal.
But you've got to be realistic at the same time as well, haven't you, with changing markets and bloody Liz Truss and Donald Trump and God knows who else we've got around,
exactly.
or have had around. It's impossible to know what's coming 12, 18 months, isn't it?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm looking at how to mitigate, not overextend myself. I think people underestimate the leverage is good and can be powerful, but also can be a detriment to people's growth, that they overextend themselves, both from a time perspective and from a resource perspective, which effectively is the same thing. But it's understanding where the exits are from day dot.
And in terms of, obviously your focus at the moment is mainly on the events company, which is obviously booming at the minute. But in terms of property, is there anything specific you're looking for at the moment? Obviously there's a big boom around supported living at the minute, which seems to be very much flavour of the month at the minute, albeit there's a lot of negative press around these kind of Ponzi schemes and things that have gone on, which I've experienced firsthand as well, unfortunately. But is there kind of any strategy that you're looking at the moment, or is it just purely, right, I've done my bit in property for now, business hat on, property will come later?
my sort of strategy, if you want to call it that, is to churn capital, which effectively is flipping houses and planning gains, stuff like that, overages, creative stuff that generates lump sums of cash. My objective really is to just keep compounding what I've got as a lump sum rather than tying it up in an asset. And I came to that decision sort of about 2 years ago. Started to exit from my portfolio at the time. I had a HMO portfolio with a joint venture partner, and property investing, being a landlord, I could see where time was being spent. And for me, I'm great at business and I'm good at property, and property's been a vehicle for me to
get into business.
Yeah. And that's just purely by chance that, my first job was working for a developer. And I think if I'd worked in any sort of field, I would have probably started a business in whatever I went into, more than likely.
Yeah. Which, funny enough, is exactly what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, my main sort of strategy is sort of flipping and sort of churning the capital. And the reason behind that is because I'm 28 and I've got the energy.
Don't look a day over 40, mate. You look great.
Mate. Yeah. Hairline says a different story, but I know I can make more money quicker using the cash that I've got, and then eventually that will change again, and I'll start to acquire property to hold, but it'll be bigger stuff. It won't be like
it'll be thinking about the long-term strategy then, when it won't be thinking about, like you said, trying to build the business side of things. It'll be about, I mean, it sounds silly at our ages, sort of 28, 30, talking about retirement, but it will be. It'll be building something for the ability to retire or semi-retire at 40, 45, as opposed to working until 65. So this episode, although it is the Property Finance Podcast, we're really going to cover more off, I think, today, in terms of, that's probably the longest intro I think I've ever done to a podcast, but I want to cover a bit more of the entrepreneurial side today. And also, I can't believe I just said that first time as well, but I want to cover that in a bit more, sort of talk about the event. Obviously, we've been massive advocates of the event, and obviously trying to help grow that as much as possible. So talk to us about the concept of the event, because obviously there are other events out there that people run, and everyone is competing in a very small space. I think that is one thing about property, is that we're all trying to do the same thing in the same space. So what was the concept behind it? How were you finding it competing with some of the other events, obviously London-based events?
Yeah, I mean, we're not kind of at that sort of level yet. And that's obviously where the ambition is.
Part of that's unfair, though. I'm going to argue with you on that, because I do think you are closer than you think you are. And that's not blowing smoke up your ass. I mean, genuinely, having been to the events, seeing the quality of the events, having, obviously in our business, we have now exhibited at pretty much every single one of the different events that people have. I found your one, okay, you might not have the same footfall yet. And I get that's where you're probably coming from, is, we haven't quite got 10,000 people walking through the door. But I think the difference that you've got, and again, this isn't to blow smoke at your ass, but the difference you've got is the people you're attracting are people who are actually doing things. I mean, like, for example, Milton Keynes, we stood there and we were talking to people about actual live deals, people who are actually doing developments, people who are actually investing money, as opposed to when we did another show. I stood there for 2 days, and I think I had one conversation with someone who was actually doing something. The remainder of the time I was thinking, I could be home watching the football. I could be doing this. I could be doing that. And I think that's the difference. And I get what you're saying. You're maybe not to that level in terms of footfall, but I think you're miles ahead in terms of caliber of people coming in the door.
Yeah, I mean, I really think for me, it's creating something of value, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's why I enjoy doing what I'm doing, rather than, which why I say I'm a great business and good at property. Property doesn't give me that buzz. I know it's a good vehicle to get you to places, but seeing the show come together, seeing people doing business, seeing people get value from the show, that gives me a buzz. And I think for me, success, it for me isn't measured by how much money I've got. It's what impact I can make on the world. And I know, and I say this again, not with money in mind, but I know the amount of value that you create will benefit you financially.
Of course it will, yeah.
Because that's how, the markets work. But
Well, I've got a very similar mindset in the sense of, I don't know what it was. The minute I turned 30, I became really aware of like my mortality, like the fact that actually life is really short. And I think part of it was down to on social media, etc. A lot of property guys, unfortunately, recently have passed away, some really unexpectedly, some guys who I was really, really close to. And it does all of a sudden make you aware and you go, shit, actually, this, like, you've got one go round on this. Like, this is a short-term thing. And I think, like you, it's about trying to find that buzz where you, and it sounds really bizarre, but at the same time, I always think to myself, right, if I pass away tomorrow, and this sounds really morbid, but if I pass away tomorrow, how many people are going to turn up to the funeral? What are they going to say? What is that lasting impression that people are going to have of me? And I always worry in the back of my head, I think, it's going to be a quiet one. It's fine, it won't cost a lot. But you think to yourself, God, it's going to be a quiet one. Are people going to have anything to say? Are people going to have this lasting impression of whatever? And I think that's, like you said, you can see that buzz in you of wanting to create that lasting legacy of, that Scott did all right. He left a bit of an impression. And yeah, you can see that when you're going around the event and you've got that massive bloody grin on your face.
No, I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I do things with integrity. I do things with the right for the right reasons. It's all about creating value, and from that, my hope is that people gain value. They want to come back to the shows, and the growth comes through people having genuine good experiences there. And yeah, I mean, the kind of approach that I'm taking filters through to our exhibitor selection. I would much rather turn someone away than have someone there just because they're paying. And
you are actually turning people away. A fair few we've spoken about where you're asking opinions on people and getting to understand what they're like in the industry and their reputation and things. And it's great to see that as well and you can see it when you go around the exhibitors as well. It's people who are actively doing stuff, who actively care about the people who are coming through that door as well. You're not just having exhibitors for the sake of it, which I think is a massive thing for the event. But what's kind of the growth plan for it? Because I mean, whether you've got the numbers to hand or not, kind of talk us through last year's events, maybe numbers compared to, I mean, if we take Milton Keynes, for example, what Stoke was your first event, I think Milton Keynes is your fourth event.
That's right, yeah.
So in terms of, I think you had 700 and something odd. It might even be more now at Milton Keynes.
Register, yeah.
Yeah. So how many did you have at Stoke versus Milton Keynes? Here we go. I'm going to test your knowledge now.
So we had 115 about at Stoke, and we probably topped out around about, again, similar to Manchester numbers, about 220 for Milton Keynes. So that's like the bare minimum that we know we can achieve at the events now. So we've kind of gone through that initial growth stage where the events have sort of doubled or almost doubled from obviously on a year-on-year basis. So we kind of know now that, right, based on what we've been doing in terms of marketing, in terms of, referral, working with partners, we know we can get at least 200 people to our events. So now it's obviously all about ramping up the spend on what we're spending in terms of marketing, and kind of focusing more on delivering more visitors through the door, and that will only come with time. And that's
of course, as people see the event and everything else, because the podcast has grown at a similar rate, I'm assuming, because you started the podcast and the event at the same time, I think pretty much hand in hand. So have both seen a similar growth spike, have they?
A little bit, yeah. The podcast is starting to momentum quite nicely. But
I mean, I've had a look on YouTube, and the views on YouTube have gone through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting obviously good guests, and the sort of momentum's there with it.
Well, obviously, you started strong as well with me as the first guest. It could only get better from there. But the views are great, and it's great to see that growth as well. And like I said, it's a lot of this comes down to the integrity and everything else of the event and generating something good. So obviously, you've got 4 more events this year. What are your hopes for those 4?
Yeah, so I mean, we're Bristol, which is next. I'm really excited about. There's a lot going on in Bristol. BTR, PBSA, general sort of developers.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, obviously those acronyms, build to rent and purpose-built student accommodation, and not everyone knows what they mean.
Yeah, sorry.
Myself included.
I forget
sometimes.
that. yeah. I forget that. So, loads going on in Bristol, and the sort of quality of or the niches that the exhibitors are in are like a lot wider and more sort of construction focused in Bristol, which is kind of the direction that we want to go. Is keeping
and you're
what we've
picking
got.
up some big exhibitors now, aren't you, as well?
Yeah, I mean, last in Milton Keynes we had Saint Gobain. Obviously, for those that don't know, they're like a 400 billion turnover business, French-based business. They almost do every building material under the sun. We've had John
Lewis. Yeah, that was a big. I mean, even I was a bit like, oh, bloody hell, okay, you got Saint Gobain and John Lewis like opposite each other. I mean, we were next to Saint Gobain, and I'm like, bloody hell, this is like there's us, which is a little kind of family-run brokerage, and I'm like. Okay, yeah, there's some big boys in this room, and then John Lewis opposite, and obviously you're attracting some of the bigger lenders as well. Now you've had obviously Roma are headline sponsors, I think, for
they are Roma headline.
Is it the rest of the year that
that's
so
right,
we headline sponsored it last year, and then I think Roma have done it this year, and I've got no doubt that 2026 will bring probably an even bigger headline sponsor. So, the quality of the exhibitors as well, like you said, it's just been mad, because you used to get in all of the normal ones, aren't you, which are kind of the lower end exhibitors, I guess. I don't know how to put that delicately, but
the small
but it's nice to see from sort of your events. You walk around and it's like, bloody hell, like you could walk into the, and actually this probably answers the question of where you want to take it, and it's as someone who's involved in developments as well, like I walk into that room and I know I could walk around the exhibits and I could walk out of that room with everything I need to do a development, to the point where you've even had different methods of construction in there as well, haven't you?
We have Bevy. Yeah,
that's it, exactly. So I'm glad you remembered, but like it's just mad to be able to go into a room and be like, I've literally got everything I need to do an entire development.
Yeah, I mean that's like the absolute ambition for the show. It's kind of the way I see it. A lot of people, even if they're established, and this kind of filters through all the way down to people that are just starting out, you kind of do the training, or if you're more established, you've kind of been sort of fumbling along and, using the team that you're used to, that sort of stuff. And I want the show to be a place where people come to find new providers that can help them either get started after they've done all the training or whatever it is. Maybe they're industry professionals and want to get into development themselves, which obviously is a regular path for people. I want them to go along to the event and meet people that aren't just going to say, this is the blueprint to do it. They're going to say, we fit this part of the blueprint. We can do X, Y, and Z and help that individual to, start the business or improve their business. And I jokingly say now I could build a house on the moon because of all the exhibitors that I know. And that's all the attendees, that's what I want from their experience of the show.
And in terms of like what's the 5-year plan for the show? I've seen your phone background. I know that there's a mind map there of where you want to take stuff, and I love that idea as well. And we'll talk a bit in a minute about mindset and stuff, but I take a lot of inspiration for you on stuff, and seeing that on your phone. I remember we went out for dinner and I looked at it and I was like, how have you got a mind map on your phone for? And you actually sat and went, well, it's this. And it's like started pointing out the different bits of the business. And I'm like, that's a bloody good idea. Because it's there all the time. Like, that is literally the thing that everyone looks at the most during any day. Like the amount of times, I mean, if anyone's got an Apple iPhone, you literally pick it, you can see how many times you've picked it up in a day, and it's bloody stupid.
I don't think it's that at the moment. I think it's, sorry to let you
have
down.
you got your quote, haven't you, at the minute?
Yeah, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skill. Don't wish for less challenge, wish for more wisdom.
There you go.
Jim Rohn.
So we've ruined my entire talk about the mind map now. So
sorry, mate.
But anyway, you had the mind map. So what's the plan for kind of the next 5 years?
So I'm kind of working it in year increments with kind of a vision for obviously where I want to get it.
Yeah.
But for the kind of next, obviously 12 months, deliver the events that we've got.
Yeah.
Next year, we use Milton Keynes as a stepping stone to the south, so probably venture into London. Probably won't be doing like the Excel or anywhere big like that.
No, but it could be a stepping stone into like your Watfords, your maybe North Londons, etc.
Yeah. I mean, the I'm learning as I go. Obviously, I'm a developer before an events coordinator, and I've kind of done events, but not to this sort of level. So every event, I'm learning something new. The structure, trying different things. Like obviously, we had the speaker area in the main room in Milton Keynes, which worked really well. Kept an atmosphere in the room. So stuff like that it's helping me make key decisions. And I think locations are a big factor into the unknowns for me. Obviously, you can look into locations, you can understand, the size.
You've had a lot of football stadiums so far, haven't you? I think
because they've got the natural facilities
you
need for events. So, football stadiums work really well, and they kind of formulate the model quite easily because they've got the AV. For people who don't know, like the microphones and the presentation.
Yeah, it's all just there, ready to go.
Yeah, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, all the gear. Yeah.
But London next year. Some other ideas sort of brewing in the background that I don't want to say publicly.
No, which is fair enough. No, don't ruin them yet.
But all very exciting stuff. Obviously, I've got a very busy mind, and I'm always looking at opportunity. Which at the moment I'm not being distracted, but I've already got ideas lists that are coming in that I know I can use to spin off from the show when the time's right. I've got a good team that can just run the events without me being there.
Yeah. So, right. Okay. So you mean in terms of not just having the events, but possibly running, like obviously I'll use the podcast as an example, but you obviously had the events podcast naturally kind of comes off that as well. So you're thinking other bits potentially.
Everything that I'm doing fits the ecosystem to grow the show, to grow the property developer show. But I'll be looking to use that infrastructure with different businesses and different ideas. So I need to build that structure, which is why I'm laser focused on just delivering.
Yeah, builds that nucleus, isn't it? That sort of cell in the centre before you can sort of sprout off onto the other bits. So, right, mindset. This is the big one. So you and I talk a lot about mindset, and you often keep me grounded. It's probably like a parent after a naughty toddler. It's, I'll often diversify what I'm looking at and move around and do different bits. So you are, like you said, very laser focused on what you want to achieve, what you want to do, and where your mind is at any one point. So just talk us a bit through the mindset and how that works, and kind of how have you gotten to the point of having that kind of mindset? Because I remember obviously you and I have known each other for 7-8 years, and I don't think I've ever known you as laser focused as you are now.
I think success is simple when you understand it. Like getting if you're chasing something, take an athlete, for example, if they're a 100-meter runner, why would they train for a marathon? It's their objective is to run the fastest 100 meters. So everything else around that is irrelevant. And if you're spending time not focused on delivering that 100 meters, then it's a detriment to the success of that outcome. So I've sort of realized, particularly when I had the former business, I'm an ideas man, big picture stuff. I'm always looking at stuff and thinking, I can do this, I can try that business, I can try that business. And I learned very quickly that you can get distracted from making a lot of money doing one thing really, really well by doing a lot of things averagely well. And sort of going back to the 100-meter analogy, if you get the gold medal on that, you've reached the pinnacle. Okay, then look at doing the 200-meter, then look at doing the 400-meter and train towards that. And I think success comes through consistently doing the boring things over and over and coming up with ideas and trying to grow a business. It isn't boring, but when you get the momentum, the work that goes into delivering the event's really exciting. I love the events because, I love the buzz and people networking, doing business, but the work that actually goes into delivering that is so monotonous. It's so boring. It kills me, but I know that is what's going to deliver the scale,
the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And in terms of, one of the big things that sits behind you is your success, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to big up your much better half. So obviously Amy sits behind you as kind of almost the rock of most of what you do realistically. So how do you find that being in a relationship, especially where, because a lot of us have been in relationships where we haven't had that support, we haven't had that guidance. It can be very difficult when you're building businesses to come home to not that level of support that you need. And I remember when I first started this business, I had that support, and it really helped to blow the brokerage up to what it is now. And how are you finding it, obviously going through those new businesses? I mean, obviously Amy's absolutely phenomenal from what I've seen in terms of the support she offers. So what's that like?
It's a natural thing, to be honest. I don't think either of us really think too much. We're on a mission.
Yeah.
And we both are super aligned as to what we want the outcome to be. And someone said to Amy that, like, so for more context, I suppose, Amy obviously works in the business full time, does all the marketing. Obviously, I run the business, and it's my business. I take on all the stress of being the business owner, and Amy sees the stress, but she doesn't have to deal with the stress, if that's what makes sense. So someone, I mean, we could do a whole podcast episode on how the relationship.
Why do you think I've started this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, how I suppose if we want to go down that route, what it's like having a partnership, relationship, whatever you want to call it, with someone obviously that you essentially love. that's cringy as hell, but yeah, I mean, Amy's kind of seen the phases of, I mean, I was put on this planet Earth to do what I'm doing now. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. I'm not a normal 28-year-old. You're not a normal 30-year-old. And when somebody comes into your vortex, if you want to call it that.
That is a brilliant way of describing it. I love that, because it is a vortex. It is an absolute hurricane of destruction and just nonsense. I love that, actually. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, when someone comes into that vortex, they either embrace it or they run for the hills.
Yeah.
There's no sort of in between. And I think if you can find someone that will embrace it with you, then that is a massive tick box, because there's not many people that would want to do that, particularly in the early days when there is no success, when it is just working 70, 80 hours a week. And
people seem to forget that, don't they? That it really is. I mean, I remember when I started the brokerage. So I'm going to take the limelight off you for 2 seconds.
That's so good.
But I remember when we started the brokerage, and I remember sitting at the kitchen table. I'd been made redundant. I had then started up a brokerage with 2 JV partners, which hadn't worked out. We had then just had our middle child, our daughter, Fliss. So she had literally just arrived. I remember being in the hospital with her because she wasn't very well. So we ended up in Lincoln Hospital. I remember sitting on what they call the antenatal ward or whatever it is, surrounded by mums and dads who were losing their babies, who were dealing with the most insane emotions. And as we were, I mean, Alice and I were sat there, and it was horrible. And I was getting phone calls from my JV partners being like, we don't want to run the brokerage anymore. We don't want to do this anymore. This isn't what we want to do anymore. And so that all fell apart. I remember we sat at the kitchen table a couple of weeks later after Fliss was better, and we couldn't pay the rent. We couldn't do anything. Like it was horrible, to the point where we had to phone her mum and be like, can you please give us some money? Like, we need something. And anyway, fast forward a year or so, I think COVID had then happened and everything else. And nobody kind of talks you through the stress of what happens when you start a business. And ultimately it led to Alice and I, unfortunately, getting divorced. And she still works in the business and things are great, but it ultimately led to a breakdown in that relationship, because although she was there supporting me, and like you mentioned, it's about coming into that vortex, we didn't only have this vortex, we had a vortex that was then like dealing with newborn kids, dealing with COVID, because when COVID hit, we then had our third child, our son Rupert, and it's like you're dealing with a newborn baby, dealing with COVID, just everything comes into it. And I think that's what a lot of people don't see with running a business. And it's what you said about those early days. I think when a new person comes into the relationship, or you go into a relationship with a new person rather, they don't see that, do they? They just see this, oh, there's no money in the bank. Oh, what's going on? And you're sitting there looking at a pipeline of £500,000 of mortgage brokerage deals going, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know whether I'm going to have £500,000 worth of fees or I'm going to have zero. Like, I don't know. And it's very difficult to explain that to, and it comes back to what you said about not being a normal 28-year-old, not being a normal 30-year-old. I don't think people realise quite how scary it is.
I mean,
it's just a constant state of shitting yourself.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle choice.
Oh God, yeah.
It's not. And do you know what? The way I explain it to people, it's the same as being a professional athlete. Like, you live, breathe, eat, drink, business.
Oh God, yeah.
And if you're not doing physical work, you're thinking about it. And even if you're sleeping, you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
You're dreaming about it.
You're waking up at 2 a.m. going, oh my God, have I registered my ICO, my latest ICO, which is your Information Commissioner's office.
I used to be able to sleep until 1 p.m. I can't sleep past 6 a.m. anymore.
No, I really struggle for sleep these days as well. It's mad.
But I wouldn't change anything in my life. Like, this is the life that I chose. I thrive on that stress. I thrive on things going wrong, trying to find solutions, stuff like that. That gives me, like, makes me feel alive, I suppose. You know, some people climb, rock faces without a harness on. That makes them feel alive. I couldn't do that. But running a business and the stresses that come with that, I'm all for it.
Yeah. And just coming back to the Amy thing. So in terms of you guys, your relationship, and I think this will resonate with a lot of people who are just getting into property or just getting into business. Do you find you have to, you said you both fall into it quite naturally, but do you find that actually you have to set aside time to actually remind yourselves that you are a couple, first and foremost, that you are together, that you love one another, and you have to kind of set that time aside to go, right, we're going to talk about business for a bit, but actually once we hit that, then it's back to...
No, not really.
You really do just fall into it that naturally that it's just...
I mean, we have different love languages, and, it's understanding what that looks like. And I think Amy isn't, if she was a business partner, then I think it'd be a different
dynamic.
Yeah.
Because
you would both be super stressed. But 90% of the time, I'm just stressed. And she's that 10% of the time stressed as a byproduct of my stress.
Yeah.
So, I won't say certain things that are happening that I won't expose her to until the time's right.
Yeah, when she absolutely needs to know.
Yeah, and that Amy's been through a process, obviously, or we've both been through the process. When I was early on starting out, in typical naive fashion, I thought anyone that didn't want to be in business and anyone that, didn't want to give everything 110%, be under super stress, was just, I didn't understand it.
I went through the same thing, of just looking at people and being like, how do you cope with just 9 to 5 and then go, like, what do you do at 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
So these people, like, the brain just switches off and I'm like, how? how do you get through that?
So that was like a mindset shift for me, because I was pushing my agenda onto Amy to say, like, this is how I live my life and you need to live your life like that. Not not like an abusive relationship, but like, when she was trying to find purpose in the world, like we all are.
Yeah.
I was pushing my opinion and my version of this is what you should do. This is how I've been brought up,
Yeah.
And for me, the process for me has been about understanding that not everyone thinks in the same way as me, and I know that more than ever now. But obviously, when you're young, you don't. You just know what you know, and everyone else's perspective is irrelevant. So that's kind of been a process. And as I sort of, as we've alluded to, that when I'm not a normal 28-year-old, so Amy's like benchmark to what's like normal is me, and that I'm not normal. So when you sort of compare, if you're not incentivized to be in business, you don't want the stress, that sort of stuff, but the person that you're spending 90% of your time with is in that realm, you kind of think, or at least Amy started to think, well, I'm not doing what Scott's doing. Is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
So over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, really, it's kind of become now, I think we're almost as one, because someone sort of described it to Amy as like, Amy's kind of sat in my slipstream. She doesn't like being at the forefront of things, but she doesn't mind being behind me and still having the sort of pressures of having a business as such.
To a certain degree, she's in your slipstream, but from what I've seen, this is just coming at it as a complete outsider, but it looks like sometimes, from what I've seen, is that she sits in the slipstream, but she's got one hand on you at the same time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that if you ever slow down, she's still there, just that little shove, just to make sure you pick back up again.
No,
and
absolutely.
It's lovely to see. And I feel like all I've done this podcast is just blow smoke up your ass and increase your ego somewhat.
Thanks,
but
mate.
it's one of those things where I think it's important for other people to see that does exist. Like, that is a thing. You can have that. You got to be bloody lucky to find it, but it does exist. And in terms of your general mindset, I'll come back to that briefly because I think it's important. Is there anything you're actively doing to keep yourself sort of to that laser focus? Because I mentioned before, obviously, I have this thing where I don't know what it is, whether I just shiny penny syndrome or whatever, but if I'm laser focused on the brokerage, flies, does incredible things. But I'll often find myself just that little wavering now and again, just going, oh, I quite like the looks of that. That looks good. I'll give that a go. Or, oh, that looks all right. I'll have a go at that. Just getting sort of diverted off on stuff. So how do you find that way of laser focusing? I mean, obviously you're a massive advocate of reading as well, which we sort of challenge one another on the amount we can read and whatnot. And my library has grown substantially since that. But yeah, what are you doing to sort of keep that focus?
So one of my sort of natural skills is discipline. That is something that I've been blessed with. Fortunately, it's a natural thing to me. I think it kind of links into, like, I'm a man of my word. If I say I'm going to do something and I don't deliver on that, it impacts me. And that's whether I say that to you or I say that to myself.
Yeah.
So I know which, if I commit to something, I'm 100%. There's no like 50% for me. So I'm either all in or I'm not. So that shines through with pretty much everything I do. You know, you'll see it with the podcast, you'll see it with the show.
Of course, yeah.
I go to the gym 6 or 5 days a week, run once a week. Like, if I don't do that, I feel like I'm letting myself down. Read 10 pages of a book, a self-help book. Reading The Rubicon at the minute, which is a book about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. So, but also read like World War II books, stuff like that. So that helps me sleep. But the self-help books obviously help me move forwards.
You get motivated,
Yeah. So I guess that as I said, success is a formula. If you break it down in its simplistic forms, it's doing the really boring stuff consistently over long periods of time. That's it. That's success. And the only difference between someone that creates success and someone that doesn't is the person that either doesn't get started or they give up, and the person that is successful either does the boring stuff really consistently for a very long time and very well. And that's usually what will deliver results. And that's that. I just break it down into a black and white format. That is literally all I'm interested in, is does it align to delivering on what I'm trying to achieve, which is a really successful show, or is it a distraction?
And how are you measuring that to a degree? Because I know some people journal and some people just write lists, mind maps, for example, etc. So how are you keeping track of all it? Because I mean, I don't have the capacity to keep track of it all in my brain, even though I try. So I've taken to the mind map style of the sort of, this is what I want to do. These are the sort of ways I'm going to do it. And also trying to track habits as well. So that habit tracking of kind of, right, okay, gym 3, 4, 5 times a week. I mean, I know I look like I go to the gym 7 days a week, but it's trying to get into those habits a bit more. So how are you tracking that? Do you have any way of tracking it?
So I don't track it per se. I've slowly evolved in terms of the kind of habits that I've created. So, for example, like the running, I hate running, absolutely hate it. And even when I'm on my run, all I can think about is how much I hate running. But I'll run 5K every Monday without fail. maybe miss a couple of weeks if I'm ill or I've got an injury.
Or if you're doing the show or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But even then, I will still commit to doing 1 run, 5 gym sessions. Even if I've got the show, even if I'm in Bristol, even if I'm in Milton Keynes, I will still find a gym to go to. That's my level of commitment to things. So I just don't, once you start relaxing the format of how you operate, that's when you need to think about, how do I track things out? I try it and then I don't stick to it. Like it's pushing through those boundaries to the point where literally, I know it sounds really extreme, and which is why it probably leans quite nicely into the fact that I'm not a normal 28-year-old.
Yeah.
But I really do have that commitment to things, which is why, you know, I give the business 100%. I give my fitness 100%. I'm shit at dieting, so that's like one thing that I'm not particularly good at. But
I suppose the thing though is, if you're going to the gym 5 times a week and running once a week, you almost kind of don't need to worry about.
Yeah. Although I've had a Greg's breakfast and a Mackey's lunch today, so
Doing well so far. Then, yeah. So, sort of coming out of not coming out of the mindset, but still talking about it to a degree. What led to, so obviously you started the mortgage brokerage as a kind of joint venture side of things. What kind of led to you wanting to exit that? So it's kind of that, just going back to this sort of journey, I want to sort of touch on how you've come to the point of being a property investor, being a mortgage broker, then getting to the event side of things. And then we can just touch a bit more on a few other business ideas.
Absolutely. So service-based businesses are really difficult to grow.
They are, mate. Yeah. They're absolute nightmare.
As you'll
Can
know.
confirm. Yeah.
As you'll know. And what I sort of realised was that you need to be in that particular service. You need to either be like yourself, that's just lives, breathes, it just anything property finance related.
You've got to have that niche, haven't you, where you go, you can't just be a mortgage broker.
No.
You can't just be.
And I wasn't a mortgage broker.
No.
I want to make that sort of clear. I wasn't a commercial finance broker. I'm a business owner.
Yeah.
My interest is growing businesses.
Yeah.
If I have to do work to grow the business, then that's fine.
You don't mind getting your hands dirty. Yeah.
I know that will lead me to where I want to get to. But finance brokering is a really difficult business to scale, because of lead acquisition and how the industry works, because it's mostly driven by relationships.
Yeah.
And if you've not been in the industry for years, or if you're not shit hot like yourself, then it's really difficult to get economy of scale.
Yeah.
So that was a factor. And what was the question? You asked me why I exited.
And it was just touching, because obviously I remember talking to you at the time, and shortly after you exited, you kind of went into this weird mid phase, which I want to touch on, because I think it's important, because people will look at you and think, okay, no, like Scott, he's always known what he wants to do. He's always been laser focused, everything else. No, there was 6 months where your brain was mush. And I remember we used to talk loads during that period of time, and you, I think we're in the process of, you got your logistics license as well. Like that's another thing, is like you are literally qualified to drive a truck, because in your brain you're like
qualified transport manager.
There you go. So you went through a period where you're like, I want to drive lorries. I was like, oh, right, okay.
Wasn't more so drive lorries as well.
Or having
a
the
haulage company.
Yeah, that was at the haulage company. So it was like, and I think it's important just to touch on that, because people always have this impression of, he's mega successful, like known everything, always know what he wants to do. But it's like, no, like all of us, you had that period of time where you kind of went, bugger, I don't know what I want to do. And then that's when the event was born. So it'd be really cool just to understand why you exited the mortgage. And
absolutely. So as I've obviously already said about scalability, that played into the kind of approach to how it unfolded, the split up with the business partners per se. It was all done amicably.
I was just say, I don't think we should cover off that it was all amicable. And like they are.
I still
doing
go
incredible stuff.
I still Matt and Mike still doing brilliant. So I keep up to date with both of them, and we basically, I won't go into detail because it's not fair, but we basically tried to go to the next level in the business, and things that were out of my control didn't align because of certain things that were going on in the background. And
so that ability to scale was just slightly restricted.
Yeah. Because we were sort of onto something new with like protection insurance, and we're looking at how we can scale that and mitigate the risk of the scale. And it just didn't work out in the right way. So I basically sat down and said, you know, I don't think the viability of the business is where it needs to be. Yeah. Effectively, I was in that business, and you know, I'm a company director before I am anything else, and that business didn't need a company director. So,
well, there was 3 of you when it didn't need. 3.
The business where, you know, the level it's at, and probably, you know, that over the years that they continue it will grow steadily. Yeah, and that's what that business needs. It needs that is the right environment for it to thrive. The skill set that I brought to it just didn't make sense for me to be there. So I basically said, look, buy me out and I'll go and do something else. So that's what we did. Obviously, I had the earn out, and that
gave you the privilege of having some time to decide what you wanted to do next.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which then led to your
haulage,
your quarter life crisis of running a haulage company.
I suppose it is a quarter life crisis if you want to call it that. So I've always my family's agriculture, so I've always been naturally hands-on with stuff, and I felt like haulage was quite a nice space to be in, asset-backed business. It seemed reasonably straightforward to scale. You just need more contract.
Well, and also out of like the whole time during the news and whatnot, because this wasn't too long after COVID, I don't think, but all the news is about the lack of like haulage companies. Like there was a real shortage of lorries, lorry drivers, and the ability to move stuff around the country. So
but like anything, I'd throw myself into the deep end and give it 100%. So I'm a qualified transport manager for the next. It's a 5-year qualification, so I can still technically sit on someone's transport license, which is crazy because I can't remember any of the information that was in the exam.
For the next few years, you can,
But that was ground zero, revised, learnt all everything. Got my class 1 license. You know, really, threw myself in.
And not many people know about that period of your life. I don't think either. I don't think many people.
They don't need to know, but now they do. So
they do now. So we've revealed all. But I think it's important because we keep touching on mindset, and it's pretty much all you and I ever talk about, really. Like I said, you keep me very grounded. But I think it's important for people to realise that it isn't always just a case of this light bulb moment where everything just happens. And it's that whole graphic, isn't it, where you see the tip of the iceberg and you've got this tiny little bit of ice at the top of the water. And it's like, that's the show for you. Mm-hmm. But underneath, there's this bloody great big iceberg, which is doing the mortgage brokerage, doing the property investing, doing the stuff with your logistics and transport manager and everything else, which has all led to then being able to create the show. And I think it's interesting for people to know. So kind of, we're going to keep delving into it. People don't know about it. I'm going to keep pushing on it. What's your mindset like during those? Because it was only about 6-9 months. It wasn't a huge amount of time. It wasn't like it was years and years and years. But what's your mindset during that time? You mentioned you were like 100% into it. But is it you're 100% into it, but in the back of your mind you're thinking, this isn't what I was destined for? Or is it a case of actually you were so into it, you're like, this is what I'm going to do?
No, I mean, there was... So the way I work is I'm 100%, as I say. If there's a slight percentage chance that that 100% even drops to 95%, I'm out. It's literally that simple. Yeah, I am either all in or I'm not. And what I quickly realised is I fucking hate driving.
So really massive part of that.
Particularly wagons. It's really stressful. It's really stressful. Anyone that hasn't been in an Arctic or drove an Arctic, it will make you appreciate haulage drivers on a whole new. You have to have eyes
everywhere.
Oh my! It's so stressful.
Yeah,
I'm just not. I just couldn't. I didn't enjoy it at all. Which is fine, you know.
You've got to be a different species of human being, haven't you, to enjoy driving something of that size for that length of time.
I mean, I wouldn't call them species, like, but
that's probably
yeah. It takes a certain individual.
Yeah,
and I suppose, like anything though, if I did it consistently, I'd probably learn to not be as stressed. But
yeah,
you know, like anything new, it was quite difficult, and
so that's what then caused that chink in the
a little bit. And I realised that it's a very well-established industry.
Yeah.
And to compete on price with, you know, Kalina Group or, you know, I can't think of any other.
I mean,
DH,
round our way, it was places like Fowler Welsh and that sort of thing, like massive, great big companies that have got 100, 200 lorries driving around all the time.
Yeah, I mean, to compete on price, because all of those have got like groupage operations, which is essentially you use one wagon to move multiple packages to distribution centres and then they distribute it from elsewhere. To compete on price is damn near impossible.
Just impossible, yeah.
Unless you've got existing contacts in the industry, which obviously I didn't.
No.
So I established very quickly that it was like a 10-year business to grow from ground zero, unless you do an acquisition. And I just I didn't acquire that level of business that makes sense. I didn't get that from my own exit, so I didn't have the resources to do that. And I'm glad I didn't. I mean, someone to look at, Nathan Winch, who is literally
doing a lot of acquisitions,
particularly haulage companies. Obviously, he's not driving the wagon. He's not a qualified transport manager.
No, he is just a absolute relentless business owner, and that is what he wants. He just wants to buy up businesses, grow them, and either exit or keep them within his Winch group, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. Winch and Co,
yeah.
So, I quickly established that there was no scalability in it from a growth perspective. That was like 3 months. So within 3 months, I'd got my class 1 and transport manager, and then realised it wasn't for me. Then I moved into plant hire. So I bought a mini micro digger.
Well, I was going to touch on that,
dumper. And then again, quickly realised that was a shit business. It's all about just running around like a headless chicken. It's a job. It's not a business. Yeah. To get to that business level, you need to be doing, 2 ton upwards. And then, probably bigger than that, to be fair, 5 ton diggers upwards. And then off the back of having the plant hire stuff, I then bought the welfare hire, which is a phenomenal business for anyone that is potentially looking for a business opportunity, where effectively you drop cabins off on. So the company that I bought it off ended up leasing them back from me. So I basically bought an income producing asset. I bought four units that was producing about $3,000 a month, and I paid, crikey, what did I pay? About $15,000 a unit. So I spent 45,000, and it was producing me $3,000 a month, around about there income.
Which is not a bad income at all. Was that 8% return a year? No, 8% a month. Sorry. So over the year, you were, what's that, 85% per annum return on your money?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, brilliant.
Not bad, is it?
Yeah. And but it's one of those industries. I'm not. You've got to be a bit of a wheeler and dealer. You've got to be not put up with anyone's shit. That sort of stuff. I'm not that way inclined.
Because you're dealing with some of the worst things that you will ever see when you're dropping off a welfare unit and picking up a welfare unit. It's amazing what human beings can do to a small toilet.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, I didn't get involved in any of that stuff. No. You just hire people in to clean them and stuff like that. So that's not so much.
You missed out on that bit.
Yeah, it's more like, again, a dirty industry in a sense of like, get your hands dirty. The people that you're sort of dealing with, like, it's not my natural social circle, if you want to make sense. You need to be pretty hard-nosed for those types of things, 60-day payment terms and, all that sort of stuff.
And it starts getting tricky as well on those, because you're dealing with people who don't want to pay their bills as well, aren't you, at times?
Well, it's all a game, and that type of industry, it's the same with haulage. It's the people at the top aren't paying for 90 days. That affects the people at the next level, then the next level, then the next level. And, I'm the last person to be paid in that process.
Cool, yeah.
So, I mean, if if you can scale that business up quickly, it's asset backed. You can get money. You can borrow asset finance to buy the assets. It's a great little business, but it just wasn't for me. And then that obviously overlapped with the show, so I was still doing the welfare. And
so, what kicked off the idea of the show then? Because you drive in welfare units around, dropping them off, and
so I attended a local exhibition, small. Local business SME type exhibition, and the guy that had set it up, it was his first event, and I thought did a great job, great little business model. Didn't really think anything of it. I was randomly driving, and I thought, what's out there for property developers? Like, obviously we've got Landlord Investment Show, Property Investor Show, which are very well established in the sector, but there was nothing out there for property developers. The domain was available, the Instagram handle was available, everything was available. I was like, that's got to be an idea. So then kind of I spoke to the guy that set the exhibition up, maybe looked at a joint venture. That never materialized, thankfully, in hindsight, no disrespect to him. And I then brought in a marketing consultation or consultant to bring the idea together, basically.
Do all the logos and the branding.
No, I'd already done all that. I'm quite good at all that sort of stuff. I don't.
Right. So this was actually to come in and
make
sort
the
of
event,
take it the next step.
To actually formulate
conceptualizing
a plan. Yeah. So, put pricing together. Obviously, spoke to you. You were like, "Yeah, I'm in."
I know. Yeah, my bank account got hit the first time.
Well, again, I'll always be grateful for that.
But that was a big thing for me, actually. I think, and just coming back to that, I think the 2 points you mentioned, the fact there was nothing else for property developers of that ilk. There was no show of that level, and it's very difficult for businesses of, I say of my size. I mean, we're obviously quite decent size, but there's nothing for sort of the smaller end brokers to kind of have that opportunity to be like the headline sponsor of an event of that size. Because normally you're talking about, I mean, you've obviously mentioned two of the large events, but I mean, if I wanted to go and headline sponsor those, I don't have the financial power to do that. I need to be a Roma, I need to be a big lender. So that was a massive thing for us. And then the second thing you mentioned, obviously, about having someone in who sort of conceptualized the idea, I think it was great, because when you came to us, it was like, here is this fully fledged business. Like it was as if it had been around for 20 years. It wasn't just a chat over a beer. It was like a proper, here's a business, here's the plan, here's what it's going to be. Do you want to come and headline sponsor it? Absolutely. And I think that had a massive impact on us. And we've seen a huge return off being the headline sponsor last year. And obviously, I mean, we're still, I think, gold level or whatever we are this year, but we've still seen a massive return on investment. I think that's a really important thing for exhibitors, speakers, etc., to actually be able to get a return on what they're investing. Because I mean, I don't know if any other show would give us the same return. Genuinely, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't
you
comment.
Can't comment on that. No.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. Well, that's actually an interesting point. Have you had any sort of comms from the other shows to be like, we love what you're doing?
No, not that sort of capacity, no. I mean, I speak to Nick from Property Investor Show. I mean, I credit him for creating what he's created over.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very well established with that show. So, Landlord Investment Show went along to their Manchester one, sort of chatted to the younger lads that work for him and their sort of sales manager, director. But yeah, I mean, I'm of the ilk that there's enough business to go around.
Oh God, yeah, so much.
Although there's crossovers in certain degrees, I don't want to do what they're already doing. I've got no interest in that. I want to create something that's unique, and that's what we're doing. And I think we bring the more construction side of property into the show, which those guys don't already sort of do, as far as I'm aware. So we're more focused on tailoring to genetic property developers, but really our attendees, Landlord Investment Show will have portfolio landlords there. We don't really attract that type of person.
No, you're dealing with people, builders, developers.
Yeah, that are active in some capacity. They're building, renovating, developing. That's our demographic. Yeah,
amazing. I think that brings us to a natural close, mate. I've really enjoyed that, and it's been good to talk through the events and everything else. And I'm genuinely, and I spent the whole podcast blowing smoke at your ass. I might as well do it one final time. but it's been an exciting journey to sort of, well, sit here and watch and listen and everything else. And yeah, I'm genuinely excited to see where the show goes, and hopefully it keeps giving us a return as well. And who knows, we might be back as headline sponsors next year.
Well, you said it now.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, it's contractual now. It's on video. This is it. You'll have sent
just say it into that camera again.
You'll have an invoice on my desk by tomorrow. But mate, I've loved it. Honestly, it's been great sitting down and just having a natter.
Having a chit chat. Yeah. No, a pleasure. Being on. I appreciate having me on. I know it's not very much property finance that we spoke about. I mean, we could cover that right now if you want.
No, makes it more interesting not talking about property finance.
Yeah.
Mate, it's been a pleasure.
No, happy days. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, everyone who's listened. Catch you on the next one.